Last film that I want to review before I let you all go, before I stop holding you hostage, is a film called Banshee of Inisherin. And I do just want to let it know, I switched over to paper notes because I saw Banshees November 1st. So I'm going to have to refer to my notes that I wrote about it the day after much more because, I remember the big beats of this film. I remember a lot of the things. I just want to remember what I really wanted to talk about in this film. So I will be, at times, just close up reading this. So I do apologize for that. But the Banshees of Inisherin. The Banshees of Inisherin is set during the Irish Civil War on a remote island, and the Banshees of Inisherin follows Pádraic and Colm, lifelong friends who find themselves in a predicament when Colm unexpectedly ends their friendship. In trying to fix the relationship, Pádraic, played by Colin Farrell, finds his efforts only alienate Colm, played by Gleeson, further escalating in a shocking ultimatum. This film stars Colin Farrell and is directed and written by Martin McDonagh. This film also stars Gleeson, Kerry Condon, and Barry Keoghan. This is Martin McDonagh's fourth feature film following In Bruges, Seven Psychopaths, and Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. This is his third collaboration with Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, with all the actors reuniting after starring together in Bruges, and after taking a detour to America with Seven Psychopaths and Three Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri, he's back in Ireland. He's back in his homeland, and he makes a film that is very much his style, very much, I think, a throwback to the humor, darkness, and sadness of In Bruges. So he returns to Europe, and much like his previous films, Banshees of Inisherin features McDonagh's signature dark comedy, theatric influence, and violence, and the film premiered at the Venice Film Festival and won Farrell Best Actor and McDonagh the Best Screenplay. Since its premiere, it has been projected to be a major award frontrunner, and next year's Academy Awards season it's going to be a big one. I honestly, for Best Actor, it really does feel like it's down to a true lead race between Colin Farrell and Brendan Fraser, maybe with Austin Butler coming in there, but I really do think it's Farrell versus Fraser. I think they're both going to be first-time nominees, and one of them is going to be a first-time winner. Going into this film, I had heard so much positivity surrounding this film that I was just a little dubious. Was not a fan of McDonagh's previous film, Three Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri, which I liked in scenes, and overall, that message of the film, the nature of it, it just never clicked with me in any meaningful way. Having seen the film Banshees of Inisherin now a few weeks ago, I can say this movie has stuck with me pretty powerfully. I was pretty blown away by this film. I found it to be quite wonderful, actually. It's one of the funniest films of the year. It is chock full of belly laughs in it. It features really beautiful cinematography. It's very violent and pure insanity throughout, and in all the most wonderful ways. It offers great performances, and it offers an insightful look into friendship, aging, and the legacy we leave behind. This direction from McDonagh is pretty immaculate. The island is intimate yet invasive, like everyone knows your business. It's one of those feelings where you're just in it, and it's just like, oh, that guy who lives across the street, he knows my whole life story. How can I escape that? And it just, these tight interiors, because this is a very small island. These houses and the bar, like all the places they're at, they're very small. And it kind of gives this feeling, it draws forth this feeling of suffocating. And in doing so, it allows us to emphasize with Gleeson's turmoil in this film. And ultimately, this is a guy who's lived his whole life on the island and just kind of sees it as a waste, and he just feels trapped. And ultimately, we feel trapped with him in this film. And it's ultimately a story where the character's existence is futile. And for Gleeson, if his existence is futile and his legacy is forgotten, then what point was there to his life? Where the character that Colin Farrell plays is kind of the exact opposite. He's like, I lived a happy life. I had people that loved me, and I loved other people. That is enough to give forth a meaningful, significant life. And it's this dichotomy that the two face, this conflict between the two and their worldviews. It arises from their different perspective on this issue. Colm himself, again, Gleeson's character, being a musician, sees his music as his legacy, his art, where Pádraic finds it in his belief of others and family. And that kindness ultimately is what we are remembered for. And as this film becomes more, and we kind of see these characters almost kind of shift, like not fully shift, but we see Gleeson kind of lean more to Farrell by the end, and Farrell lean a lot more towards Gleeson's worldview at points. And of course, with this film being set in the Irish Civil War, which this film is set in 1923, it is a reflection of these two friends' conflict, which is supposed to be something larger to speak about the Irish Civil War. It's very much a backdrop, and I think it's supposed to be there to further kind of explain what this relationship is and what larger metaphors this film is trying to say. And it's the idea that just one day, friends and neighbors just all of a sudden are at war with each other without rhyme or reason, and just begin fighting for no apparent reason. And while the film is, like I said, it's not a film about war, it offers an explanation for just how one day we can wake up and just stop with our lives and kind of just like all of a sudden just hate each other. It's so weird. And that's kind of what war is, like, especially a civil war. It's just like, oh yeah, that person who I considered a friend now, just because they're on a different side or they're on a different border, they're now my enemy. And it's just that where it's so bizarre. And this film allows that to be bizarre. It's like, yeah, that's a weird thing. That's like a weird tradition humans do, and the wars that we fight. And this war element, this violence of it, is just especially potent in this film, especially with how violent these two characters' actions end up being. And McDonagh does a wonderful job of showcasing the absurdist extremes of conflict. But at its core, the Banshees of INISHERIN's greatest storytelling strength is exploration of aging. Gleeson being a older character than Farrell's character. This film is just kind of at its best when it's just these two characters sitting at a table drinking and discussing life and its meaningless and the mundanity of life. And in doing so, it allows us to understand who these characters are, the lives that they lived before we came into the picture. And it allows us to see that these characters have lived lives off screen, and often these stories that are lived in, they feel very true to these people, and they're funny, yet they're tragic in their own sense. And we get this same story out of Farrell's mouth. Let me rephrase that. We get these stories that the two tell. And one story that can be told by Gleeson and feel so pessimistic can feel so optimistic out of Farrell's mouth. And we just get to, again, see that dichotomy between the two, the hopeful versus the cynic. And in doing so, we understand how these two characters see the world. This is the theatrical elements of McDonagh's screenplay writing. The fact that like this guy was somebody who worked on live stage, like you can really feel those elements present in these sections of the film where you're just like, oh yeah, this is two characters discussing life. And in doing so, they do it so interestingly, and we learn about it, and it feels so dynamic despite it just being two guys sitting at a table drinking beer. And I already teased how I thought Colin Farrell was going to be a pretty clear frontrunner for the award. That's also because he's just magnificent in this film. It might be his best performances he's ever given, and that's in a year where I've liked 3 performances I've seen from him. I thought he was good in 13 Hours. I thought he was great as the Penguin. I still need to see After Yang, and I thought he was absolutely wonderful in The Banshees of Inisherin. And it's a tough performance to pull off. This adds another notch to his already loaded resume of 2022. 4 very different characters. I would probably say this is the most, not optimistic, because that would probably be more 13 Lives. This is the most fun Farrell gets to have in some ways, where it's just this character is such a high wire act to balance. It's the sincerity of it. This character is kind of just described as dumb in this film, and Farrell does that very well. And this character lacks cynicism, which is kind of the wonderful thing about this. Like, we're fully on board for this character who is just ultimately a guy who just wants to exist and drink beer with his buddies. And it's funny, it's heartbreaking, and it's just a very straightforward premise. And the fact that Farrell makes something dynamic out of somebody who's just so, almost in terms, just uninteresting. Like, this guy is just straight up is who he says he is. He is just a guy who lives on an island with his sister and just wants to drink beer with his buddies at the bar. And in doing so, Farrell is able to create a character that we fully understand despite his lack of a backstory. And listen, I think we'll see him rewarded for this performance. I think at the very least we'll see him nominated. It kind of feels like Brendan Fraser is unstoppable at this point, but I think these two are going to be on the awards path together. And you'll definitely see Farrell get some acclaim for this performance. This is an undeniable performance. Alongside with him is, of course, Brendan Gleeson, who plays Colm in this film. They share a terrific on-screen chemistry. I will say, Gleeson campaigning for a Best Supporting Actor seems unfair. He is the lead of this film along with Colin Farrell. These are very much co-lead performances. So while there is some little bit of like fraud in the categories, they're very good. Like, he's very good in this film, and it's definitely the meatiest role in the film. Like, there's so much layer to this character, and you just feel the pain and the intrigue and turmoil that this character feels, and Gleeson delivers it in spades. So much of it is just nuance of this performance, and it is displayed through the facial expressions he is able to offer, the movements, and the penetrating stares. This character just is silent for a lot of the film, and it feels very powerful. Like, you're just you get lost in this guy's eyes, and you see the pain that this character is just like, it's in him, and it feels so sad and vulnerable. It's really uncomfortable at moments, and I think he's wonderful. I'd actually probably put him as the most likely to win the Best Supporting Actor role. I think it's actually funny because it's going to be Brendan Fraser, A24, going up against Banshees of Inisherin. And I think that's probably how the Best Supporting Actor is going to shake out. I think it's going to be Brendan Gleeson versus A24's Ke Huy Quan for Everything Everywhere. So that's kind of my prediction right now. Rounding out the cast is Kerry Condon and Barry Keoghan. Keoghan is wonderful in this movie. This is the true supporting performance in this film, and he's the comedic foil for the film. Like, he definitely delivers the biggest laugh lines of the film, and this is really where a lot of the humor comes in. He delivers, like, just straight up one of the funniest performances of the year. While Condon is the exact opposite, she's very much the heart and soul of this movie. And the two just works so well. And the gravitas that she brings in contrast with the stupidity of Keoghan's like drunken idiot character, they work so well in tangent in supporting the Farrell and Gleeson. They're both wonderful. Kerry Condon is a lock to get nominated. I wish Barry Keoghan would. I think with Brendan Gleeson being in this category, he won't, but it's sad because this is a truly great supporting comedic performance. And his stuff's incredible. Every time he is on screen, he is so captivating, and the audience just loves this guy. He really just gets it. What I will say about Banshees of Inisherin, because I just have been praising it, I'm not going to say that this film is perfect. There is something about this film that I struggle with, and I still struggle to after seeing it like 3 weeks ago. And I don't want to go into detail, so I'm not going to. But without going into details, I want to discuss the third act of the ending of this film, and I don't know if it fully worked for me. The film becomes a lot more aggressive towards the last 30 minutes of it, and it becomes very cinematic and very compelling, but it also is very much dour. And there's a certain moment in the film involving livestock, and when this scene happens, I literally felt the audience like kind of pull away and pull back from this film. And it's, I think, the point of this film where a lot of audiences might fall off for this film. And it's very thematically challenging. And I don't know if it fully worked for myself. I found it to be thematically challenging, and I liked how it challenged me. I also found it a little frustrating. I think that is supposed to be the idea. I think that is intentional. I think that is really supposed to just kind of the stupidity of what this whole argument is. So you're kind of left just like frustrated by it. But it's an ending that I think is going to create reaction. It's going to create a lot of hot takes, and it's going to be the real division point of this movie. And it makes me want to see the film again. I want to see this film knowing what I know about the ending, and if it plays better or worse for me. Like I said, when I walked out of the theater, it didn't sit right for me. I'm still mulling over it, and I've heard a lot of podcasts. I listened to the Big Picture talk about it. I listened to IndieWire do their reviews on it. It's really provocative in a pretty wonderful way, a way that most films today just aren't. Like, this film does not give you an easy out for the ending, but ultimately, like I said, I don't know if it worked for me, and I think this is a film that time will tell. And I think the best thing about Banshees of Inisherin, this is a film that I will be watching. This is a lot of just like provocative filmmaking. It's also just straight up like a fun movie to watch. Like, yes, as dark and as cynical and as dour as this film can be, it's also crazy funny. It's a really easy watch. It's not a particularly long movie. I think this film is pretty well damn spectacular in this all ways. Performances, writing, direction, cinematography, technical, lighting, just everything is pretty wonderful. The music in this film is very good. The scenery, God, I want to live in Ireland after watching this film. The sweaters that they wear, oh my God, Colin Farrell has some sexy turtlenecks in this film. But anyway, I'm a huge fan of Banshees of INISHERIN. I'm going to give it... What do I want to give Banshees of INISHERIN? This is the challenge. I'm going to give it 4 out of 4 stars. I think just even with the criticisms or critiques that I had about the ending, or even some of the confusion I had about it, it's still very well done, and it's still so worth the watch. And I do prefer that it was challenging and never let me out, because I think that is ultimately more rewarding than a film that just leaves me like, okay, that's how the film should have ended. So ultimately, Banshees of Inisherin, I feel even more confident after saying that. It's a 4 out of 4 star movie. Check this movie out. I think this film is going to be a huge crowd pleaser for the people who see it. And I think this is probably McDonagh's easiest film to get on board with, even despite how dark it is, because the comedy is so, at times, broad, especially with Barry Keoghan and Colin Farrell, especially in that first hour. This film is laugh out loud funny multiple times. Check it out. Banshees of Inisherin is great.